Right.
All right.
Who decided that, women? I don't know. Right, let me just share. So hopefully this will come up and you can all see it. And I'm just going to make it big. Good morning, everyone from slightly sunny Scotland. This takes a moment. Yeah, shameless plug. A wee plug about the journal, which is being released 3 weeks tomorrow on World Vegan Day. We could have probably done it a week earlier, but hey, we might as well wait. So there's going to be a journal launch event, which you can sign up to on Eventbrite. And this journal is essentially a platform for which all of us undergrad, postgrads, went too far, activists, scholars, academics can find an outlet for the work that we've been doing. There's definitely been a shift to the requirement for vegan sociology, and this I was asked to edit this, and it's just been an amazing journey for all of the team, the collective, and I hope that people will be able to join us. It's 4 o'clock GMT. The clock's changed the day before for those of people in the UK, so it's not British summertime anymore. It'll be Greenwich Mean Time on World Vegan Day. So we've got a bit of plug going for that this week, and also the Eventbrite link. So I'm very, very excited. There are 6 articles in the first volume, and we hope that this will be an annual amazing piece of collective work. So I have to thank everybody in the collective and all the students who contributed to it as well. Okay, so my presentation today is about my PhD research, which I have since I'm Scottish, called We Vegans. I'll explain it all in a minute, obviously, but I'm looking to discuss exactly what the experiences of young vegan children in particular are in this country. There's my little vegan, Maya. She's 7 now. She was 6 in that picture, and she likes being the center of all of this stuff, so she's very excited. She's certainly been the inspiration for a lot of this stuff too. So although I'm a researcher at University of East Anglia under Kate Stewart, I am based in Scotland, and I'm doing this part-time, self-funded and at a distance. So how not to do it is how I plan to do it. But hey, why change the habit of a lifetime? So I just wanted to talk you guys through really the idea behind it, what I'm hoping to do with it. I'm at the very, very early stages of this research, for sure. It's not something that has been looked at before in any great detail, so I have a lot of groundwork to cover. In the first instance, most of the interactions that young children, full stop, whether they're vegan or not, come into contact with are all these social institutions, which we will all know from our undergraduate sociology studies, are things like, all the agents of socialization, the family, the media, the healthcare system, education system, and so on and so forth. And it's really probably the education system that I'm going to focus on throughout this, although the healthcare system, the attitudes of healthcare professionals towards veganism will be relevant. The attitude towards veganism in the media more generally will be relevant. Family attitudes can also be relevant. Certainly they were in my experience with people panicking that I was going to raise some really unhealthy, nutrient deficient child. So yeah, this is an ongoing thing. So a lot of the focus will be on these different types of structures, the norms and values that they maintain, reinforce, and often purposely, because it suits people that have the power, I guess. So right, okay. If this will shift, which it won't at the moment, I don't really know what's happening. Here we are. So I thought I'd give you a bit of an overview of some of those key institutions in Scotland. Scotland estimated current population is just short of 5.5 million people. that is made up of 2.5 million households. So you can see on average, there's quite a few people in each household. The last census figure had us down at 5.3 million nearly, which was up kind of, a fair amount. And the next census obviously should have been during this year, but because of COVID, it's been put back to March. Of the population, the under 15s make up 16 roughly % of the population. I think for the first time ever, the elderly outnumbered the young in the last round of statistical analysis. And that's quite significant too, in terms of like moving forward and whatnot. Anyway, the estimate then for 2020 is around about 880,000 that I've made, just taking 16% of this 5.5 million people. Within the education system, those people everyone goes through it. They do preschool, which can start from when you're very young, all the way up to age 4 or 5, just before you start primary school. You spend 7 years at primary school between the ages of 4 and 5. You finish up at 11 to 12, at which point you go to secondary education up till you're 17 or 18. Then there's tertiary education after that, further education, which I work in, or higher education, which is university. And anyone really from the age of 15, if your 15th birthday falls after December of a particular academic year, you're able to leave school at that Christmas time. The 2020 estimates of how many children that is in terms of primary school students is 393,900. They're just short of 394,000 primary school children. Now, clearly not all of those children are going to be vegan. In fact, of course, it's going to be a minority, as we would expect, just now anyway. So there's a lot of kids being taught a lot of stuff that maintains the species as status quo, which I'll talk about in a little while. The healthcare system is also relevant. We have a National Health Service, which is free at the point of need for anyone who requires access to a GP. Prescriptions are free for everyone in Scotland, regardless of income. No needs-based assessment happening there, which is great. But also the approach that a lot of healthcare providers take to veganism is interesting, and is something that I've certainly experienced in my time as a vegan parent, and I know that others have too. So the healthcare system is relevant to this in terms of making sure that people are fully informed of the reality of a vegan diet and a vegan lifestyle, the ethic behind it, not just what you do and don't eat. Our political structure is relevant, obviously, because a lot of the rules and regulations and guidance comes from this location. We have a party political government that's housed within a fuller parliament, which has some devolved powers from the UK government at Westminster. So again, it's a complex set of who's responsible for what. And often decisions that can be made here are limited, and the responsibility for those decisions is held in London, which creates some difficulties up here for people. We do, though, in terms of our representatives in Parliament, have a proportional representation system. So it's not just the first past the post, it's less populist. And for the first time in the history of UK politics, I think, we now have Green ministers in the Scottish Parliament that are actually going to be in government positions, which is amazing and definitely going to make a difference to what I'm going to try and do and what we're all hoping to achieve through our scholarship. In terms of the media, we get the standard kind of, anything you can get on your Sky box, Virgin box, other providers are available, but we also have some Scottish specific media, a lot of different Scottish radio stations, a dedicated BBC Alaba, Gaelic speaking TV channel, and also BBC Scotland and STV, Scottish television. So there's a lot of outlets that can be accessed for people who have different ideas to get to the Scottish people. Newspaper press as well. We have the Scottish version of a lot, especially the Sun and the Daily Mail, Daily Fail. Did I say that out loud? Sorry, Daily Mail, and all those other kinds of newspapers. So that sets the scene for really what the kind of interactions that we all have in Scotland, but in particular our children, and what has an effect and an influence on their lives, really. I thought it was worth adding here that we now, thanks to the Vegan Society's campaigns, have the Scottish Milk and Healthy Snacks Scheme, which now includes plant-based milk where there are medical, ethical or religious requirements. So prior to this, the preschool would only have entertained a plant-based alternative to cow's milk if there was a medical reason, but through perseverance and it's now amazingly available on ethical grounds as well. Too late for Maya when she was at nursery. I had to take her milk in for them, and even at primary school I do have to supply them with the milk that I want her to have. That said, milk isn't really required during the day if they've had it in the morning, but that's a whole other discussion for another day. So that's the stats for Scotland. In terms of legislation that governs us as individuals and our children in particular, which clearly is where I'm going with this, there's a lot of, there's a real shift towards equality of opportunity, equality, diversity, and inclusion. And this is something that not only is the government committed to, but children actually learn about in class from very, very early on, primary 1 and 2. They're learning about what it means to have well-being and what the different elements of that well-being would consist of. That within the frame of the overarching Curriculum for Excellence, which is our Scottish Qualification Authority's framework within which children should become productive citizens, active. There's a whole bunch of stuff that should happen here, but just to really make them fully rounded members of the community when they finish education. And that Shanari idea there is there. So if we start down at SAFE, that's the S and it goes HANARRI. Here are all the things that children should experience: safety, health, they should be able to achieve, they should be nurtured, they should be active, respectful and respected, responsible in terms of their citizenship, and key to this is included, right? So you might not be able to read that, so I'll read it to you. Having helped to overcome social, educational, physical and economic inequalities and being accepted as part of the community in which they live and learn. So this is a part of the guidance that governs Scottish education. And a lot of this stuff is really where my work's going to focus. The other thing here is about being respected, having the opportunity, along with carers, to be heard and involved in decisions which affect them. And clearly a lot of the decisions of the structures and systems and institutions in society have a direct impact on their experience of it. So it's important that all kids, vegan or not, have a bit of a say in that. In terms of wider legislation, there's obviously the Human Rights Act, which is based on the European Convention of Human Rights, and the Equality Act of 2010, which replaced a lot of other kind of bits and pieces of legislation like Equal Opportunities Act and those kinds of things about trying to make sure that the Race Equality Act, I think, was one of that as well. So they were all housed in this one larger Equality Act, which has a number of different characteristics, as with the ECHR in Europe, that should provide protection. And further afield, in terms of children anyway, there's the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And again, these are things that children learn about, and they can even actively attempt to have their school recognised as a rights respecting school. So they understand they have the right to play, they have the right to learn, they have the right to healthy food and so on. And there's a lot of different rights that they are aware that they have. So this sets the framework, I hope, for you in terms of how the Scottish education system should work for every child. The reality is a little bit different, however. Often, despite, sorry for the poor quality of that graphic, but often despite the push that we have towards equality and diversity and inclusion and so on. It's great on paper and people go to training, but the reality of it for people is very different. So a friend of mine, a former colleague, Geordie, challenged his employer because he felt he was discriminated on the basis of his vegan beliefs. Ironically, it was an anti-hunting organisation. I used to work with him in Edinburgh, and he, through his legal challenge, had veganism recognised as a legally protected ethical belief under a lot of that law that I was just explaining to you there. So this is great. This is very recent and certainly is something that can make the application to children in the education system and elsewhere within healthcare, for example, really valid and shifts can be made towards changing things for them. In terms of previous research on vegan children, there isn't really very much. There's a bunch of literature here about how adults feel it's been raising a vegan child, and certainly that would be part of what I'm planning to do. What have they encountered in terms of healthcare practice and whatnot, and individuals within the system? There is a study, Hassar and Harris in 2010, about what vegetarian children are motivated by. And interestingly, that's a mix of vegetarian children. Some come from vegetarian household. Some have chosen to become vegetarian despite being in a non-vegetarian household. And also they spoke to non-vegetarians. So interesting study, but not vegan. Griffin in 2017, this is fairly recent, is looking at the self-identity and how that the experience of being vegan in a non-vegan world is like in adults. There's plenty, actually, just a suggestion, like a kind of selection here of what it's like for children in terms of their self-identification, their social identity. And there's plenty, as you guys will no doubt be aware, in terms of the stigma associated with veganism. But there's nothing, as I've said over here, nothing investigates the lived experiences of vegan children in Scotland or elsewhere. So none of this stuff speaks on their behalf. So what does? Who is best to do that? They are. And that's where I plan to focus my attention. What we know about children so far and their attitude to animals, young children especially, is this quote in the middle here from Burke and Williams, again, just last year. Children held a view of humans and animals as engaged in a mutually beneficial relationship where animals give products in exchange for food and protection. So children, through what they've been taught in the socialization process, understand or believe that the so-called farmed animals, in particular cows, lambs, and chickens in this case, are given back to us because we're looking after them. So they do genuinely believe that. And this does imply, as I've said at the bottom there, that this is some kind of willing, like a gift that they give to us. And as long as children believe that, then I suppose there's no reason to be surprised that they continue to consume these products that they feel they've been given by these animals. And therein lies some of the problem. A lot of that stuff, though, comes from, I hope Kate and Matthew don't mind me using this. I know it's the older version, but I think it speaks very well to the nature of what children are taught. And I'll very briefly cover it because I've got quite a lot still to say. Where they might see a chicken, for example, might fall into this category of farmed animals. So they're unlikely to see the factory farmed chickens. However, so they would be invisible. They're also objectified as things, right? They're things that are for use. They're more likely to see them once they're all pre-wrapped in, in a supermarket. So they're visible, but they're still objectified as things that can be eaten. They might see them as part of, some of my research already looks at animal characters on television, in particular in kids' TV. Perhaps that's how they see chickens, as little cartoon characters, all very cute and whatnot. Or they may be one of the families that keep backyard hens and chickens, as Catherine Oliver was talking about yesterday. Either way, though, none of this provides them with the subjectivity of humans. They don't, they're not taught that hens, chickens, any other animals, actually. Rabbits could fall into the same circumstances. They're not taught this stuff. They're taught that these they just meet these categories for our human use. And this contradiction in what they're taught. So we should love these animals because they're pets, maybe. So I hate that term, but that's what they're told. We should really like them and take them to a farm and I want them very cute. And at the same time, they're fed them often in school dinner canteens and whatnot. So it's this part that really becomes the biggest challenge in terms of what vegan children have to endure as part of their education. And here are just some examples of the kind of things that young vegan children, in particular primary school children, which is where I'm going to focus my attention, because it's so influential at that age. Some of the things they might experience. So over in left here, they might be doing some baking or other cooking, where the use of eggs is just accepted as norm, where actually, as many, if not all of you know, you can bake a cake perfectly successfully without the use of any animal products. Maybe it's Easter time and you're decorating hard-boiled eggs to roll down a hill. And again, it's just the use of the egg. Perhaps, I mean, I focus on chickens here just from a previous talk, but perhaps they are going to have a city farm or Almond Valley Heritage Centre is near to me, and the kids all go there and they get to feed the animals and all that kind of stuff. It's all very lovely. But then they'll go home and they'll eat eggs or eat chickens in the house. Chick hatching projects are very commonplace, as are these life cycle caterpillar kits, where basically these caterpillars are fed by the kids. The cocoons are kind of monitored by them, and at some point they hatch, often potentially when there's no one in the building for a whole weekend, while the kids are on holiday. So they're kept in these little anyway, you get the general gist. They're maybe taken to the zoo as some kind of educational visit, or they're taught through worksheets and whatnot. This D here about the food pyramid. What it's saying is, it's saying dairy. What it should say is calcium, I think, but it doesn't say calcium. They're wanting to be saying dairy here, which is not good. And this kind of thing across here. Chickens give us eggs and meat, aren't we? Shouldn't we be very thankful? Getting back to the Burke and Williams study that I mentioned before. Finally, a lot of things, this links back to the Peppa Pig paradox that I published last year. A lot of times it's a case of using, and this happens in school as well. Let's make some fun faces out of these pieces of dead animal. Really problematic. So quite a challenge. Luckily, there are people that are trying to change the system. I'm wanting to look at what it's like to be in that system at the moment, but there are people already working on trying to alter it. And Laura Chepner's work with vegan primary schools across the UK, not just in Scotland, is really important. Her book has been invaluable, and I certainly furnished my daughter's teacher every year. It gets passed to the next teacher. And there's some people talking about, Barbara Bolton as an example here, talking about what the legislation should be. What we could do instead, and I'm almost finished, you'll be happy to hear, what we could do instead is just find alternatives. There's compassionate alternatives to all of this stuff. Here's a food pyramid that doesn't involve any dead animals. Here's some alternatives to chick hatching projects where you can buy this kit. It's about £30 UK money, and it'll last forever, and it'll do every single class. Instead of taking them to the zoo, take them to an animal sanctuary. This is a vegan one in Scotland, which is absolutely amazing. Ask them different questions instead of just saying, what do chickens give us? Okay, how are they the same or different from other species? Important. It is paradoxical, but this is the stuff that's the kind of background to what I'm wanting to do. So very, very quickly, because I'm conscious of time, although I did have some extra. There is a real difficulty here for vegan children in particular, when that's the kind of systemic, structured education that they are being subjected to. At best, it's uncomfortable for them. At worst, they really might be quite distressed by these kinds of practices within education. And it's not particular to Scotland, I'm aware. So how can we change all this? So here's what my plan is, and I'm only literally in week 1 of my PhD, having had maybe 10 days in. I might be 10 days in, but I have been thinking about this for a very long time. There's the UN Conventions of the Right of the Child, and that's available for anybody. I will be putting my slides onto my academia page, by the way, if anybody's interested in the detail. But I'm hoping initially to get the voice of the parents through some kind of survey data to find out where the difficulties that they have identified their kids might have been. But again, that's going to be one perspective, and it's not the perspective of the child themselves. So this is going to be key. I want to interview these vegan children, find out what it's like to be them within the system, what the difficulties are, what the good things are about being vegan. And then through those interviews, analyse thematically their responses, if that's possible. I'm still kind of sorting out my exactly what methodology I'm going to use, but it will be qualitative data analysis of this. I expect there to be certain themes, perhaps about possibly ridicule and being left out and this kind of thing, but we'll see. And in the meantime, this is going to feed into maybe what the schools are able to provide, not just to the vegan children, but maybe to everybody, just an idea. So I'm looking for social shifts in all those institutions that I mentioned before, and ultimately, vegan children should become fully included. Veganism should end up, I hope, eventually being seen as normative practice. Perhaps I'm doing a bit of wishful thinking there, but it's one more step towards total liberation, which is what certainly what I aim to be working towards throughout my life and career, and I know many of you do too. It's another step towards that, and I'm hoping that it works. There's a whole bunch of references there. Again, I'll put the slides onto academia so that you can dig around them if you are interested in any of the other information. In the meantime, all that's left to say is thanks very much for listening to my rant about the Scottish education system and vegan children within it. Wish me luck, and I'll be happy to take questions afterwards. Thanks a lot.
Sweet, thanks, Lynda. I think we'll wait till the end of the panel for questions, if that's all right. So next up we have Kate Stewart and Matthew Cole. Very excited to have you two. And I also have to give a plug for them. And yeah, by the way, don't forget about the Vegan Sociology Journal launch on World Vegan Day. Please stay tuned. We will be sending around the Eventbrite link for that very soon, like this coming week. So make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. I'll put a link in the chat. Another plug, Matthew and Kate are going to be coming to see me, yay, lucky me, at Canterbury and University of Kent. And they're going to be giving a talk on vegan methodologies. And it's like a school seminar talk, but anybody can roll in if you want to come along, if you live in the area. And if not, we're going to be live streaming it on Microsoft Teams. So if you would like to join in on that, please do give me a shout, and I'll put my email in the chat here as well. So without further ado, if you guys like to get rolling. Do you have screen sharing? Here you go. Okay.
There we go. All set up, I think. Okay, I can't see you. Yeah. Well, I'm going to assume that you can see us both still. So what we wanted to talk about today really is just, it's a little bit indulgent in a way. We're going to talk about how our experiences over the last 13 or 14 years working together have sort of given us food for thought in terms of where we're at, where we've come from, what we've done, and what we see as some of the wider issues of establishing sociological vegan scholarship in the academic environment that we work in here in the UK. So it's a bit of a retrospective, a bit of a reflection of where we are, and from some of that, some thoughts on what we see as important looking ahead. So first up, there we go. Really just looking back at where we started our engagement with this area of our sociology, and neither of us were really from or particularly aware of any sort of vegan sociology network or kind of grouping of other sociologists. Of course there were, but I think that we all sort of were doing our work in isolated, dispersed ways, lacking any real sort of, as I say, network or disciplinary identity. And I think that for a lot of us, and speaking for myself in particular, felt that the work that we did was very much kind of on the edges of our real jobs, that we were doing it in addition to the proper sociology that we were doing in our academic roles as well. And when Matthew and I first started working together, we met at a conference in Boston in 2006. Right? We were working in completely different areas of sociology to where we are now and to what the other was doing. So I was working in a dental public health unit at Cardiff University, and Matthew was doing his postdoc on unemployment at Bristol. You're going to say some more about your postdoc.
Yeah, I was reminded by Lynda, a comment you made in the chat yesterday about funding and the difficulties of accessing funding. And it made me just reflect back on my own story and how fortunate I was, because I wrote this PhD thesis about unemployment, which got funded, because that's a very fundable topic in sociology. And then I was very lucky to get a one-year postdoc straight after on the basis of doing more about unemployment, which I completely lost interest in. You know, I became vegan not long before then, and I wanted to do stuff on veganism. So I was able to use that very generous postdoc to go to Boston, talk about veganism, meet Kate, and sort of the rest is history kind of thing. But that was just amazing good luck that the timing worked out. Obviously, no way I could have afforded to go to Boston to give a talk under my own steam back then. So, yeah, what an amazing fluke that's kind of led me here in a way and led to us working together. And I think that does speak to the difficulties that a lot of people still face, gaining legitimacy and indeed the funding that comes with that to do this kind of work. So yeah, just thought I'd share that.
So as well, looking back on those kind of early years when we started working together, I think some of the other issues that we identify, issues around capacity and audience, being able to fit in this work that we were interested in into our, I suppose, legitimate workloads, being kind of able to say, you know, I need the time to do this, make the case to do that as part of the jobs that we were doing. An issue of how that then shaped our academic identity, our professional identity in the jobs, the academic jobs that we were doing, and also finding suitable audiences, finding people to talk to about these ideas that we were developing. And obviously we were really lucky that we were working together on these sorts of things, so we were able to bounce ideas off each other. But finding an audience was also a challenge at that stage of all of this. And the other aspect of finding an audience and finding allies is also being able to support what they're doing as well, in order to be able to support the I guess the capacity and audience shaping opportunities that our colleagues have as well. We found ourselves as well in these early years, and still do to a certain extent, the difficult decisions we have about publishing choices. Do you try and get published in a hostile mainstream paper with a wider audience and start breaking some of these issues about whether this is a discipline area or not? Or do you stay in that relatively safer bubble of a kind of preaching to the choir, preaching to a scholarly audience who are already, in a sense, persuaded that this is a valid area of sociological scholarship? And we've also had some interesting experiences over the years with the various slices of the British Sociological Association in terms of the main annual conference, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about in a second, the food studies conferences, the events that the animal studies group within the BSA have been involved with as well, and all kinds of interesting experiences. No lunch, which sounds like it's a bit of a small and sort of insignificant thing, but at a big conference, at a long conference panel day, literally there have been conferences where we've just not been fed. And for those of you who know how expensive the BSA is, that's fairly infuriating. We did once at Leeds get presented with a banana to share because there was no food put on for us, and that was all the food that there was all day for us. Being put in what we might call an also ran panel, just a collection of things that don't really fit with anything else, so we'll put them in a panel all together, and delivering things to empty rooms, I guess, as well, and the frustrations but also some merits from that as well. And I'm going to talk just a little bit more about some of those BSA experiences. It's illustrated on this slide, a little slice of experiences from the main conference over a 3-year period. Now, 2014 was the year that our book, Our Children and Other Animals, came out. We'd secured the contract for writing that at BSA a few years earlier. So we had kind of really quite a nice few golden years at BSA. And I think that this was almost like a high watermark in 2014. It was the 70th anniversary of the founding of the Vegan Society. And we used that as a kind of as leverage, persuasive leverage, to put on a panel that we were part of. And, you know, there was quite a few of us talking about veganism at a thing that was put together. But this wasn't smooth linear progress. And as I think we've seen over the subsequent few years of that conference in particular, still those setbacks coming along. So the year after that, we were in a stream plenary. We were speaking in a stream plenary that the Animal Studies study group had put together. It will always be a stream plenary on our CVs. It will always be a stream plenary in the archived conference proceedings, but literally there were 3 people in the room, one presenter for each of the papers and the chair who organised the stream plenary. We had a lovely chat and it was very interesting, but it was also really quite disheartening, especially after, you know, the achievements that we'd had this bigger event the year before. And then the year after that, this sort of, you know, strange bedfellow also ran panel experience that we had. Again, really interesting paper that we were in with, but absolutely nothing. So people who turned up for her paper really weren't interested in mine. People who turned up for my paper really weren't interested in anything else. And it's very difficult to get things sort of going and, you know, have that conference experience about sharing your ideas from things like that. In terms of publishing choices in those early years as well, we had, as many of us will have, examples of these sorts of things, some really bruising experiences from reviewers. So this was from, we were totting these up, but I think we got 6 reviews in total for this paper. And these are extracts from 3 of those reviewer comments. This was from the British Food Journal in 2013. And well, you'll see some of the stuff that's just exasperating, infuriating, and downright nonsense sometimes that people put, and a real kind of pushback against the ideas. The one that's the big extract at the bottom there was particularly frustrating because they were answering the questions and saying, as you get a sense of from that last answer, under point 2, yeah, they've done the literature review fine, but it's biased. It's like, yeah, all the specific questions that the journal, that the review pro forma had, going, yes, they have done this. Yes, it does meet this standard, but then just repeatedly putting in, but it's biased, so don't publish it. But it's biased, so don't publish it. And this, you know, this idea of providing balance, this is very interesting, but stick some stuff in from the Meat Advisory Board, that sort of thing. And when you have experiences like this with reviews, it is very tempting just to stay in those safer bubbles, perhaps. But I think that they serve as an important reminder of the resistance to these kinds of ideas, how much work there is still to be done, and why we do need to do it, because that's connecting us again to the pushback that we get. So we do need to persuade audiences beyond these sort of safer bubbles as well. So putting ourselves through this sort of thing, I think, is still important. So where are we at the moment then? Where do we think we're at? I think we have a British vegan sociology, which is a wonderful and a fantastic thing, something that even I think 5 years ago we wouldn't have felt confident saying. We see that there are ongoing overlaps with more established critical animal studies and vegan studies framed areas of scholarship as well. And we're very much able to have what we see as this British vegan sociology now, because we've been able to elbow a bit of room within the discipline, and because of these links and connections to other areas of relevant scholarship. And what we see is a network with strengths in all directions and opportunities in all directions, both vertical and horizontal. In terms of vertical, and this conference this year, as it was last year, is just such a fantastic illustration of this. Up and down the academic life course now, we see vegan sociology being done. We see emerging undergraduate content, and where that's happening, students really like this. They really engage with this as part of their sociological studies, and from that it provides a platform to a growing and thriving postgraduate community. Fantastic early career academics doing brilliant work that we couldn't have dreamt of doing in our early careers as sociologists or as vegan sociologists. And then people like us, more established academics who have perhaps originally come from other disciplinary or subdisciplinary boundaries and have found a place in vegan sociology. And then there's those horizontal links as well across other cognate disciplines. So we see, for example, starting to look at some vegan sociological issues within criminology, within human geography, those linked discipline and subdiscipline areas that we know sociology is connected to. These notes have some scribbles of yours on them, Matthew. Did you have something to say?
I can have a go. Yeah, I was really inspired by the first panel yesterday, the Australian one, even though we're talking about British sociology, but it did make me reflect on some of the particular strengths that sociology as a discipline brings to this field, to this topic area, if you like, to this movement, and especially that emphasis on reflexivity and uncertainty and the provisional nature of the knowledge claims that we make, and being upfront about that. And I felt that was such a wonderful conversation to listen, and such a contrast with the absolute certainty with which our opponents, if you like, the animal industrial complex, the absolute certainty with which they proclaim the knowledge that they have. This is what other animals are for, this is what they need, this is what they want, these uses are legitimate, they don't require any reflection or critical analysis whatsoever. And what sociology is so good at always reminding us to do is to always be reflexive and humble as well, have humility about the limits of our epistemology, and to question it, and to never feel settled, and always have this sense of movement and mobility, that things are always changing. We will never perfect it. We will never understand other animals we will never understand the world as they understand it, and so forth. So it's always a question of doing our best and refining that and developing. And yeah, so thank you to that panel again, because that really kind of blew my mind in the best possible way and made me think, I'm so glad I'm a sociologist amongst what other disciplines I could be in. No disrespect to any other discipline, by the way, of course. But, it's one reason why I love sociology still, and why it's so good for what we're doing. The intrinsic nature of the discipline is so useful, productive.
Yeah, it is the best discipline.
Well,
yeah. I mean, we can be polite, but let's be honest.
I'm a lecturer in criminology, so I can't fully
That's
agree
just a
with that.
subdiscipline of sociology, and we all know that.
Okay.
Anyway, back to what we're meant to be talking about. So this is just an example of some of the stuff that, particularly through Matthew's role in the Open University, we've been able to put together, and thinking about how we build capacity and content and visibility for this as being an area of sociology. So last year, the Open Learn course, which the picture on the side there, and there's the link up the top, we'll put these links in the chat as well when we're done. That's an Open Learn resource. It's there, anybody can take the little course, but equally in terms of others trying to get a foothold in their teaching content as well, these sorts of resources are there. We were talking yesterday after one of the panels about those of us who are here who'd been using some of the recordings from last year's conference in our teaching as well. So being able, this network now being able to support that capacity building process in terms of how we can introduce things. And Matthew was sent through just in the week some of the metrics about how some of that open university, open access material that he's worked on, and that some little bits that we've done together as well, the metrics that they're getting through on that, which are looking really really healthy, because you know, you get open university. I'm currently putting together an option module at my new place of work. I'm going to get 20 students a year maybe at most who are signing up for that. He's putting stuff on at the Open University, and you're talking hundreds and thousands in terms of being able to access new audiences. But not getting too carried away with ourselves. These old stereotypes and things still persist. If you haven't read the section in this book where Jenny Clinton went and met Matthew and talked to him at the Open University, you should. Always cheers me right up. I find it, the way she describes him, I find it really very amusing. So this book came out in 2020. The author, as part of the section that is about vegan meat on it, went and spoke with Matthew at the Milton Keynes campus. And basically, she agreed with his ideas, the points he was putting forward. She was persuaded by, but still this idea that the vegan has to be pushed away as someone different, someone other, this idea of the humorless vegan. Are you a miserable vegan, Matthew?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, but even if that is the case, even if Matthew is a miserable git, which he can be, but he isn't always. And of course, vegan sociology is far from being unique as a scholarly area where we are held to test by whether we are funny or not. So we know that that's not unique to us. But and excuse my language, but fucking hell, why are we being held to account in terms of the validity of our scholarly ideas by whether we can take a joke or not? So what if we aren't funny? That's not what we're trying to do, but still it is a mechanism in which we and our ideas continue to be rejected, if you like. So looking ahead then, looking forward, some of the lessons that I think maybe we should draw on to take things forward. First of all, the importance of peer review, and I know that Matthew's done some work with this organisation, and there was a session that you took part in on peer review a while ago, and we see that as being something really, really important. It's engaging in the peer review process as peer reviewers is a really important way in which capacity is built for vegan topics to become accepted or acceptable for publication. There is always a temptation that when you're sent something for review that is on veganism, to just kind of wave it through, that enthusiasm to go, yes, come on, another vegan paper. But we really have to make sure that we're applying rigor to that, because we want this to be a robust and a rigorous discipline area, and the responsibilities of peer review in ensuring that are really very important. And as I say, sometimes it's very tempting just to go, yes, get it out there, get it published, but it has to be good scholarship. Looking ahead then, the growth of undergraduate teaching, which I've mentioned already, the development of option modules and what that can do. I think those of us who are working in that sort of area and providing those kinds of elective or option module content in the courses that we teach on, we're seeing that they're popular. The students like them, they take them, they get a lot out of them. But then, of course, there's all those knock-on effects. As soon as you've got an option module in a course, it needs to be scaffolded in the core somewhere else in order for it to provide a logical step for students to go to. We've talked as well about how there are resources out there that we can use to help us individually build those sorts of things. And I think that that's a really important way in which we can help bring this kind of undergraduate content into our teaching. The importance of developing and supporting postgraduate capacity. I think one of the challenges that that a lot of us encounter is being able to put together suitable supervisory teams within the rules that our own individual institutions have, but having that expertise sufficiently in one place in order to be able to put together an appropriate supervisory team, and that still, I think, is an area that is a little bit difficult. And that looking ahead, we need to make sure that we are retaining that distinctive subdiscipline identity, which continues to have those strong links to allied disciplines and academics, but that is distinctly sociological. And I think, as Matthew said just a moment ago, we aren't here, we're sociologists, we aren't here to create new alternative certainties. We're here to destabilise certainties. We're here to disrupt. We aren't here to tell a different story about animals, but to using terrible language in my notes again. We aren't here to tell different stories about animals, but we're here to fuck with all claims of certainty about animals. That's what we do as sociologists, and we need to remember that. And what I'm going to conclude with is another lovely little extract. This is, we found this when we were moving house. We got a physical letter for this one. This is a review from our very first paper that we wrote together, which was published in Food Culture and Society in 2009. We had 5 reviews for the reviewers set for this one. We always seem to get so many reviews. Yeah. To be fair to the journal editor, he did say ignore number 5, but I'm including it because you might find it interesting. So, but goodness me, yeah, and in particular that that last little sentence before it fades out there. This paper reminded me of some of the humorless, there we go again, feminist deconstructivist work of the 80s that we are now quite thankfully beyond. And that first sentence there, the authors didn't have a sense of humour or joy in their lives. Not a bit. Well, quite thankfully, I would say, in response now to all of those comments, we aren't beyond vegan sociology anymore than we are beyond feminism. And that brings me enormous joy into my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Erica in the chat was saying that we might even do a special the seminar where we just share our bad reviews. I don't think I've saved any of mine, so props to you. Those are really good. Oh, the chat was just blowing up.
Yeah, and we've not seen any of that. We'll catch up with the chat.
I really enjoyed this talk because this is the kind of nitty gritty behind the scenes real life of doing the work that we do. And I think a lot of people really appreciated your candor here. All right, let's get to some of the questions.
It's been quite cathartic.
Yeah, that's what I wrote in the chat. That's exactly how I felt. Just, oh my goodness. It's one of the great things about us coming together with this project is that we are definitely not alone. We don't feel alienated, and we realize that there's a real pattern to this. Although I don't think I've ever got that kind of, where's your sense of humor? At least not in the next.
Well, maybe we genuinely are humorless,
Yeah,
and
it might just be us.
We might just be us.
It might be true.
Well, I think other people, Roger was in there saying that he got that as well. I mean, people will make jokes to my face in academic spaces, but I've never had them call me humorless or whatever in official review. Let's see, there's a question, we can keep this combo going. There's a question for you both. Often vegan sociologists get accused of being overly emotional and letting emotion influence their work. I saw some of that in your reviews. But surely emotion can be a powerful political force and used in a radical way. I wonder if you both find that when you were accused of bias, that people were talking about emotions in a way.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the value in us putting ourselves forward for those bruising reviews, you know, going into that arena, is that it does it does remind you that you're pushing buttons, and that's what, you know, that's certainly our feeling about what we should be doing as sociologists. So there's a sort of win almost to be had when you get those sorts of things. I think that absolutely, yeah, you're pushing the right buttons when you get that kind of thing, that people are maybe accusing us of being, you know, what this whole idea of being humorless or biased or over emotional. They're talking about themselves, really.
Yeah, I mean, some of the reviews and, you know, experiences you have remind me of some of the research that I did with Karen Morgan. There's a paper with vegophobia in the title, some of you might know. And that's kind of an analysis of anti-vegan stereotypes in print media. And some of the comments you get back from, you know, other sociologists, you think, well, this is just reproducing, you know, really sort of lazy stereotypes, really. It might be dressed up in slightly fancier language, but, you know, hang on, do a bit of your reflexivity as a sociologist and think about what you're saying and the way you're framing it. And that's kind of disappointing. But as Kate says, it kind of shows that you're doing something right if you are pushing those buttons and stimulating those unreflected stereotypes to be reproduced. So maybe it's kind of a good thing in a way, but it's not nice when it turns up in your inbox.
No, and again, you know, we're lucky that we work together. And when these, I very nearly told you what the email said when Matthew forwarded me the reviews from that first slide that I put some reviews on. It was a 2-word email when he forwarded me the reviews. At least, you know, you kind of have each other when you get those awful reviews. If you're the only author, that really can sink you into a kind of, but you know, if you're working with somebody else, if you've got someone else who you can just get sweary and drunk with about those reviews when they come in, it does make it a lot easier.
I think that there's some interest here. We could put together just like a 1-hour seminar where we share our stories. I think it'd be fun. Let me jump over to Lynda. I do have a couple more questions for you too, but I'm going to jump back to Lynda because the questions for you guys are on a slightly different topic. Lynda, I was wondering, and this is a question from me, I was wondering when you're towards the end of your presentation, you were talking about these new efforts for like vegetation and people resisting the indoctrination, the hidden curriculum of speciesism and mainstream schooling. There's a whole history of humane education led by, say, humane groups. I don't know if the RSPCA was involved, but a lot of them in the late 1800s and early 1900s were involved in that. It's a sort of different kind of agenda there, but I was wondering if you've looked into any of that history. I know a lot of people have written books on that recently about efforts to intervene on children when they're younger. And that was a major campaign of the animal movement in the late 19th century.
Yeah, I've not dug that far back, but I did an internship recently with animal charity evaluators, and that was my research topic was humane education. And very quickly I learned that a lot of humane education though doesn't seem to, is in itself speciesist. So a lot of the attempts to make people think more objectively about maybe where their existing ideas come from are in themselves speciesist. So the humane education as a rule hasn't necessarily included animals, although again though, even within the Scottish SPCA here and whatnot, and they get into schools and they're talking about animals and they take animals with them and they may or may not be rescued, but the overarching, the theme is still that these are farm animals or these are pets or these are, so even in an attempt to make people feel more of a connection with animals, I think the disconnect is still there because they're not actually being encouraged to consider an alternative way of looking at them, and that, you know, they shouldn't be standing in front of a class with some kind of, you know, a rabbit and talking to them about how best to keep them in a hutch, and it's self-defeating in a way. So the humane nature of it wouldn't, so unless, I mean, like I say, I'm not widely read on this, but it seems to still miss the point of being humane if you're including non-humans in that space.
And I think another big difference between the work that you're researching in present day from those big efforts in late 19th century is that a lot of that had less to do with animal rights per se, more to do with we want to civilize and culture our youth and make sure they grow up to be upstanding citizens and represent this nation to the world. So a lot of it had a lot of that nationality sort of stuff going underneath it. And definitely there was some classist issues going on there. So it's
Yeah, and
definitely an interesting kind of fear that yours takes.
it's not that long ago that we had people in cages for people to look at, to learn about. So yeah, I think the word education maybe needs a bit of a review aside from anything else.
And just on that topic, because you were just talking about the rabbits they bring in and stuff, I asked in the chat and some people were trying to give more information, but the chat was moving so fast. I did not know that the caterpillar butterfly thing was a major school thing. I vaguely knew they existed, but do you know anything about the industry that's behind it?
I don't know too much. I know there's a lot of companies make them and sell them on various online outlets. They don't cost that much. You get a little package with 5 caterpillars in a little tub, some sugar stuff and various other things put them together. I didn't actually even know that these were a thing until my daughter's class did them, despite me being very clear to the school that I didn't want her involved in things that involved live animals, particularly if they were confined in any way. Yeah, massively problematic. In the same way as the chick hatching programs, which are maybe more well known. But I think again, it's an effort. I understand the sentiment behind it, where they're trying to get kids to be more considerate towards insects and other animals. I mean, this is what most of this stuff really comes from, but just the execution is lacking severely. So yeah, I think I'm not sure who's responsible for the provision of the caterpillars. That is something that I no doubt I'll end up down that particular
This is a
rabbit hole wormhole.
It's going to be very interesting. And, I have to say this, as you're talking and how your kid, of course, is going to school much different time than you are. So they're bringing back all this new evidence. I remember when I was, there was like 1 year that I didn't go to the regular school. We moved away to another state for like a year and then we came back. And then that 1 year I missed it. But then my brother went up into that year that I missed. And so if I had been in this class, oh boy. But what it was a hunter's education class, because I grew up in the mountains, I grew up in the South, and everybody hunted. So everyone was required to take a hunting education class. In that, and he came home with all the curricular material, and in the class was telling you how to shoot animals, how to gut animals, how to hide their corpses from the general public because people don't want to see that, like all this like indoctrination of the hunting culture. And this was in the late 90s. And this, as far as I know, it's still going on. So it's a little bit worse than petting the bunny and learning to put them in the hutch.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true. That said, I mean, I think a lot of it's not quite the same, but I know a lot of even home economics classes and cookery and all this kind of stuff, it still involves this. I know in our college, for example, where I work, our catering department, the lecturers there, if you're ethically vegan there, I mean, vegan is ethical, I don't need to put the two together. If you're vegan in there, you're going to struggle to actually complete that course without being made to undertake some of these I don't know, butchery skills and whatnot. So it does go further than this, but I think the primary education, I'm not fortunate enough to have been given the choice when I was that age. I didn't become vegan till I was in my 20s. And then, I mean, it's interesting because I know that Kate and Matthew talk about finding the vegan sociology later, but I was searching for it. That's what even got me to social science in the first place. I would never have studied at all social science if it hadn't been for me trying to find a reason why I went vegan literally overnight with a leaflet and other people don't. So I searched and searched. I ended up doing undergrads in politics, social psychology, philosophy, loved all that too. But sociology is still what I stick with because it's the best investigatory way of looking at things. But yeah, so interesting. Yeah, here's hoping, and I'll keep you all posted. No doubt next year I'll be a year in and I'll be letting you know how it's going.
Thanks, Lynda. I might come back to you. I think I have another question for you. Let's go back to Kate and Stewart. Kate Stewart. Sorry, Kate and Matthew. So I have here from Catherine. Thank you so much for sharing this, Kate and Matthew. It really is cathartic. In my main discipline of geography, I'm very quickly noticing a rush to claim veganism and plant-based research, it's very annoying, by various different groups, especially now it's being linked with environmental claims, and the ethics, politics, radicality is totally erased. How do we push back against veganism being co-opted and misrepresented? And she also adds, there have been some real yikes papers out there in geography recently. Maybe Catherine can jump in a moment and explain some of those, but what do we do to push back? Who's stealing our stuff?
Well, yeah, I totally kind of feel that, experience that happening as well. I mean, that was a motivation behind a chapter I wrote a few years ago about the early vegan society, a discourse analysis, you know, applying some of Foucault's ideas to the first few years of their publications and trying to, I suppose, reacquaint people with those motivations, which are very much about other animals. And yes, there was, of course, concern with human health and environmental impacts and all the stuff that's still part of the movement now, but that core was about changing the nature of the human relationship with other species and making it less harmful, less exploitative. That was the underwriting thing. And one of the reasons I did that was exactly to try and push back against what I thought was some misrepresentations of veganism. So I think at least as academics, we do have some kind of voice, we do have some kind of credibility. Of course, it's always being undermined in various ways, but you know, we do have that opportunity to publish and speak and you know, contest the meaning of veganism and try and make it productive in the ways that we feel are important. In other words, as a liberatory movement. But you know, the forces against us again are huge and powerful, not only within academia, because of course, if people come to veganism or construct veganism in a particular way from a position of much greater power than we have, i.e. coming at it not as animal liberationists, if you like, but as something else, then we can very easily find ourselves being pushed out or sidelined. And not only that, of course, in the broader context of the commercialization of plant-based, or you know, the appropriation of or misappropriation of veganism as a label, as a brand, we're up against it. But we can at least keep reasserting what we feel veganism really is.
And I think as well, it's another thing that having a clear disciplinary identity emerging now helps with, because that does sort of provide a bit more of a kind of rhetorical platform almost to be able to go, no, hang on a minute, that's bad scholarship that relates. I mean, you know, all areas of all disciplines have some shit work being done in them, or some misuse of I guess some core concept within them. But I think at least when you've got a sense of at the heart what that discipline is, what it does and what its purpose is, it gives you a little bit more of a sense of being able to call back at where you see that poor scholarship happening, rather than just going, there's just me over here and I'm disagreeing with just you over there. It does help, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and I was just seeing, Catherine, your comment again in the chat, and I think you know, hopefully this is also helping each other out. If we do publish in these areas and we do push back in platforms that are then citable for each other, so you know, we can you know, advance our knowledge claims on that basis collectively as well, because I always hope that, as I'm sure we all do, we hope that the stuff's helpful, that you know, people read it and find it useful, and at least something they can stick in a reference list, if nothing else, to say, look, this has academic credibility because it's been published on before, therefore, you know, you should take what I'm writing now seriously. And
you know, we don't want everything to be too cozy. We need to disagree with each other. We need to shape these, have these fights in order for our own ideas to develop and progress and strengthen and be challenged. So, you know, again, a bit like what, you know, the horrible bruising experience of getting the bad review, you kind of have to choose the positive outcome from that and go, right, okay, well, this is pushing me, this is challenging me, this is making me frame why I think this is unacceptable or bad, and sort of tease out those wins that you can get from it as well.
Yeah, it does fire you up, at least getting those reviews, you know, once you get over the whatever emotional reactions. And then, of course, you know, you can use them in a paper like 10 years later or whatever. So
yeah, keep your reviews always.
Yeah.
You never know when you might want to screen grab them.
All right, thanks. I'm going to jump back to Lynda because another convo sprouted up in the chat about other people in Austria. I see in Austria, someone else had to go to a hunting course. A lot of people are talking about vivisection experiences. So your child's quite young, and then you're aiming at young children, but I know that some of these vivisections are taking place with pretty young kids. I know this is the late 90s, and I was still I had to take a 0 because I wouldn't dissect more than once. And so this is still around. So is this going to be on your radar at all? Or are you just looking at food?
No, I'm looking at everything, the whole experience for kids in school. I think in Scottish education, to my knowledge, although my daughter's midway through primary school, so again, anecdotally, I don't have much evidence of what happens before high school. But there are TV programs, for example. There's a TV program with a couple of doctors that are teaching kids about the human body. It's all very great. But when they get into their lab, and they are genuine medical doctors, it's pig hearts and lungs and things that they're using. In fact, they even had I think they had a placenta, human placenta in there, a pig placenta at one point. So it's these kinds of things where it's just like, well, we couldn't use a human, so we're just using this, but that's okay because at least we're not using humans, and what that message is. And sometimes it's really subtle if it's even there at all. So I think it starts with the use of animal product in primary, and then it works up, oh, speaking of which, there she is. And then it works up to being a little bit more intense and maybe more direct in secondary school. So, yeah, no, anything to do with, once I know what it's like to be vegan at school, in primary school, where is she? There she is. You do know. Then I'll take all that information, you know, whether it's about trips or whether it's about practices or whether it's about the food, which is only the tip of the iceberg, really, isn't it? So, and she'll be my focus group, I guess. Initially, she's my trial run. You saying hi? Did Daddy do your hair?
Thanks, Lynda.
Anyway, case in point.
It's nice to meet you. I have another question for Matthew and for Kate from Nick. It's regarding where you've landed on that question of trying to publish in more hostile mainstream journals versus perhaps risking preaching to the choir and more specialized vegan focused journals. And Nick, I think I lost the rest of your question in the chat. I'm not sure what you were asking there. You want to put your mic on?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess I was asked a while ago more in a critical animal studies context of should, like someone in that field was saying, should I study published in general animal studies and make that more critical animal studies, or should I sort of build the field of critical animal studies? And I guess the same with vegan sociology as well. Like, yeah, I'm not sure where, like my answer was sort of either or both, like either of those are good. But yeah, do you have any feelings on the idea of publishing in, I guess, more mainstream sociological journals versus publishing in more specifically vegan sociology spaces?
I think a bit of both. I think a mix is important, that you know, that we know that the acceptance rates and the length of time it gets to get something out in a big mainstream publication is an issue, regardless of how bruising then the review process might be. But, you know, it takes time and the odds are stacked against everybody. And so it's about balancing getting that platform for your work with having the work out there at all, that sometimes you've got, you know, it's a case of going, right, we need to get this published, we need to get it out there, and the quickest way of doing that, or the straightforward way of getting that through review, is to perhaps, you know, focus on those more specialist areas of publication that do already get it. And we did an awful lot of, when we first started writing together, but you know, after that Food, Culture and Society paper, an awful lot of you know, writing chapters, because you get the references then, and then that gives you the leverage to be able to write things that you can submit in terms of papers and stuff. But so I think you know, it really is a case of us mixing it up. And not just having one strategy, but going for a combination of different things, depending on, it needs to get out there, it needs to get a new audience, all of those sorts of things. And then sometimes you do just need the comfort of going, nobody's going to brutalize how funny we are if we try and publish this piece of research here.
Yeah.
Got anything to add to that?
Well, not really. I mean, yeah, I agree with all that. I think one of the exciting things was starting to get invitations to write chapters in books. That was really cool. That was one of the first signs that, oh, things are happening, you know, a movement and an academic aspect of this movement is emerging. And yeah, so I've loved having that opportunity. As Kate says, when you know it's kind of almost a safe space, you're going to get constructive feedback, but you're not going to be told this whole idea is ridiculous and you shouldn't even be thinking these crazy thoughts or something. So there is still value, even though as people have been saying in the chat, it doesn't have the status because of the way that universities are run and neoliberal universities and so on. But it does still have value for one as a academic, I would say, to publish in those specialist areas as well. And preaching to the choir is not always a bad thing, because again, it's about helping each other out and giving each other ideas that we can build on. So both, ultimately, if you've got the time and the energy and, you know, to do it. And
it occurred to me when I showed you the slide with the extracts from the British Food Journal reviews towards the beginning of that presentation. A couple of years ago, they got in touch with us to sound us out about the possibility of doing a special issue on veganism.
I've totally forgotten that.
Which did make us laugh, having been through that really bruising review process with them a few years earlier, and they didn't publish that paper in the end. We didn't get it through. So that, yeah, these things are all doing work. You know, they're all having an impact, not in the way in which, you know, university systems count impacts and outputs and these sorts of things, but they're doing a job.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just, you know, on a practical level, there's so many great books now, you know, edited collections of critical animal studies or vegan studies or whatever, and just having them on your shelf. I mean, get them down, look up something, find something you can cite. It's great. It's wonderful to have these resources which weren't there in anywhere near the same amount before. So yeah, it's still valuable. Preaching to the choir, or however we frame that.
So we're coming up close on 10 a.m. UK time, the hour. How about that for wherever you are? I have a couple more questions for both I guess all three of you. If anyone else has any last minute questions, you want to throw them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up here so folks can go have a comfort break.
Oh,
Corey's frozen.
Am I still frozen? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you froze for a second.
You're back.
You're back now.
I hope it was a very beautiful face, not me going, okay. Anyway, I'm gonna stop it at 10 a.m. after this, unless anybody has any last minute questions. Otherwise, I'm gonna launch into these last two. We'll go back to Lynda. You've been asked, oh, thank you, it was very interesting. And some of the local primary schools around me engage the children in looking after class animals like goats or chickens. I wonder if in these spaces there are more positive ways to engage children with animals, or if the treatment of the non-human animals will remain exploitative.
Yeah, I think I saw that one too. That doesn't happen near me, but I know that the person who asked that, I think it was Ruth, is not far from me. it's always going to be exploitative, isn't it? As soon as you've got an animal that may or may not be looked after, even if it's fully responsibly for that animal. Hi, honey. The very fact that they're caged and they're housed and they're considered pets at all, that's therein is part of the problem. So it's the normative nature of that really is part of the challenge. I think I do anticipate some kickback from all of this because it's the type of thing that's been going on for years. The chick hatching program, for example, you know, at the end of it, there are chickens. So like they have to go somewhere, and often, wait a minute, often they don't go back to the farmer. They're then, oh, like you can adopt one of these, and sometimes they end up being cockerels and people don't want them, and then they end up in a rescue centre, and so it goes on and on. So yeah, as far as I'm aware, certainly in West Lothian, there aren't any of the large animals. It would be things like hamsters and mice and things like that, but it doesn't make it any less exploitative, which I'm sure most people would agree.
So this reminds me, yesterday we had a little bit of a debate in the chat about therapy animals use in domestic violence shelters. And it's some animals are it's like instrumental use. And how can these animals express agency when they're basically being forced into the classroom experience? And I think about, like, for instance, if I take my dog to the pub, she knows at a certain time, this is pub time. And she gets excited at the door. I'm like, all right, you sure you want to go deal with people tonight? So she's like, all right, here we go. So, I mean, at least we have that moment. She knows where we're going. She shows me she's excited, wants to come. And then if she doesn't want to interact with people, she can come over to me, or I'll bring her bed with her. I mean, that's forced interaction. She's with me, and I'm not going to get up and take her home, but at least she knows when I'm leaving the door, I know what's going to happen, and I'm excited to go. Animals in the classroom, animals as therapy animals, emotional support animals, whatever it may be, do they really have any opportunity for agency? They're going to get carted along or put in a truck or
exactly
anyway. Yeah.
And I think even, I mean, from my perspective as well, most of us here probably, it would be ideal, you know, a world without any kind of companion animals being necessary. I mean, I would imagine those of us that have them are rescued. So, but it still doesn't make it right. They shouldn't have been, the need to have been rescued shouldn't have even been there. So that opens up a whole other thing that certainly is not part of my plan. But yeah, it's definitely.
What about what about like?
Sorry, Corey?
There's an animal sanctuary here that encourages schools to come and learn about the animal. It's completely vegan restaurant, vegan signs posted everywhere. And I guess the difference is that if the animals don't want to bother with you, they go to the other side.
They don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have one of those here. They don't have any food facilities, and they're still quite young in terms of their having been established. The one that is more popular, unfortunately, in the cafeteria isn't a vegan sanctuary. And in the cafeteria, kids can eat animal products, including bacon sandwiches, even though there's pigs in the sanctuary. You're like, really? I mean, I despair, to be honest. Hang on, my darling, I'll play in a wee second, okay?
We're almost done with her. Or maybe we'll switch over to Matthew and Kate, if that's all right. This last question. So Matthew and Kate, you've been asked. I think.
Sorry to interrupt. Maya was wanting to say something.
Oh, come on in.
Yeah, hold on. Say hi. Move over a bit.
Welcome to the conference.
What were you going to say about being vegan?
Well, also in my school, we have tuna sandwiches for lunch normally.
Yeah.
People do.
And what do you have for lunch?
I have packed lunch.
Yeah, there you go.
Very special.
Do you like your packed lunch?
Yeah.
Especially now she gets crisps as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that.
So cute. Did you have anything else, Lynda? Because I was going to jump over to Kate and Matthew, if that's all right.
No, not at all. But like, I guess maybe what I missed in the talk was just to say that ultimately I want to try and affect change within the system, which is what we're all about, right? This promise of sociology is to try and create. Even Auguste Comte at the very, very beginning of it as an ology, it was always about trying to make society better. And if causing less harm isn't making it better, I don't know what is. So I'm going for it, but you know, we'll see how we get on. Kate can keep me right.
So I guess on the other end of the educational spectrum, we're talking about producing the curricular material, producing books and chapters and things. I think Zoe was asking how much labor you put into quote unquote uncritical animal studies, conferences and books and things. It seems important to fuck up some of these discourses, but it also takes time and energy that could be spent in more critical spaces, she says. What's the balance there?
Yeah. I mean, it can be a difficult, frustrating, bruising, time-consuming part of our work. It's not a particularly pleasant and rewarding process sometimes, contributing to those. I think, as we've said, we do feel that it has value in levering the place of the kind of scholarship that we're doing, but it's almost a sort of intellectual self-care. If you do too much of it, you're just going to crumble in the end and stop publishing anything anywhere. So it is about keeping I suppose a healthy, balanced diet of different outputs and audiences, in order to keep the conversation moving forward, in order to poke the areas of our disciplines that need to be poked, but also to do the things that we find intellectually satisfying and rewarding. Keep it mixed up.
Yeah, Kate, were you going to say something about the BSA?
You can.
Oh, okay, all right, well, it's your idea, but so Kate is keen to put together a BSA study group, a vegan sociology study group. So if people are interested in being involved in that, then email Kate. Do you want to put your email in there?
I'll put it in the chat. My
yeah.
new email. I changed jobs in August, and I'm still very excited about being at my new place, but I'll put my email address in there. Carry on, love.
Yeah, but the question made me think back to one of those early BSA conferences, maybe the first one that I spoke at about veganism, and having this sense that there was a real kind of split in the audience. I mean, at that talk, actually, there was quite a few people turned up, but from the questions and reaction afterwards, I got the sense that there was a sort of critical animal studies and an uncritical animal studies crowd. And even though we were kind of notionally connected under an umbrella of a study group, it always felt quite uncomfortable was putting it too strongly. It wasn't uncomfortable. It felt sort of clunky, and like we really didn't gel as a group, I felt. And hence, many years later, this idea.
Yeah, because I mentioned earlier about our experiences with BSA in particular, and kind of flitting between the animal studies group that there was, the food studies special interest group that they've got, and neither ever was quite that home for a vegan and critical piece of scholarship. There were always these elements of other things around that as well.
Yeah. So hopefully we can put together a new group in the BSA. I think it's worth trying.
Yeah, it's been on my to-do list for ages, and I'm embarrassed as to how it keeps just. We've had a pandemic, and I've got a new job, and we've moved house.
No one would have known that
unless
you just said it.
Corey knows. She knows how rubbish I've been.
She wouldn't tell anyone.
She's too nice to us.
Anyway, we'll get there.
All right, I put a call out on Twitter as well, and we'll get to it when we get to it. I'm going to push stop recording on here.